Hello and welcome to Raj Sabha TV. You're watching discussion today with your host Rajat Kane. In this edition of the show, we'll talk about India's emergence as a major destination involved in the field of medical tourism. Now, that stands for, in the last decade, an average of 861 foreign tourists visited India for medical reasons daily, which is a big number that also speaks about confidence in the health and medical facilities here in India among the world. Now, every year, more than 10 million people go to other countries for treatment for some kind of medical support. We currently are at number 5 among 41 countries in terms of medical tourism. Now, medical tourism, it's not the excursion or would say a fun term. It's basically a proper professional term used by the industry for movement of people from one country to other country for seeking better medical facilities. Now, India holds top position in terms of medical tourism among Asian countries. So, how important is this sector for us? To discuss more on this, we are joined with a panel of 2 guests. Dr. Ashok Chaudhary, who is Associate Professor of ILBS. Many thanks for joining us, Dr. Chaudhary. And Urmi Goswami, she's Senior Journalist and Associate Editor, Economic Times. To begin the show, ma'am, let me start with you, Urmi. In terms of the movement of people from other countries to India, what is the trend that you have noticed?
Well, there are two sets of two streams of medical tourists that we get. One, of course, is from countries where the medical facilities are not as good as in India. So they come here because the treatment facilities here are better than in their home countries.
Okay.
The other, of course, these are very broad trends. The other one is, of course, because the medical facilities here are good, but also the cost is lower than in their home countries, and the waiting time for them is also lower. So, you'll see a lot of people from the UK coming here because the NHS waiting times are longer, or people from America coming here because the cost of procedure is about 65% lower here than in their home country. So that's the two broad trends. And we have seen over the, say the 10 years, the last decade, so to speak, an explosion. So you went from about 1.5 lakhs or 1.3 something lakhs medical tourists a year to almost 7 lakhs in 2019. So that's just pre-COVID. So there has been an explosion. We have leveraged our better systems of tertiary care, which do exist in this country, and we have been able to attract those people. Again, we have seen a lot of people come in from the Middle East, from Iraq, from Yemen.
Right.
Again, they're coming because facilities here are better, but they also have the ability to pay. So that's one big trend that we have noticed. It's been an industry that's been growing at a fast pace. They were expecting about 22 to 25% growth had it not been for COVID. So clearly, this is again another area where the medical sector sees its high returns on investment. So those are the broad trends of the sector.
Right. Thank you, Urmi, for taking us to the broad trends of this sector to start discussion with. Dr. Chaudhary, in last many years or last decade to say of, as a medical practitioner, what is the trend you have seen for people coming from abroad for medical treatment? In your own interaction, what has been a reason for those people choosing India?
Yeah, as you said rightly, and also Goswamiji. So India is, you can say, best destination as far as the medical treatment is concerned, particularly high-end procedures. You can say organ transplants, liver, kidney, heart transplants, and also highly complex surgeries. So these are the, you can see the destination-wise across the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and other countries. The first destination preferred is India in these terms. And right, suggested by her, it is the UK and US because of the waiting time and because of the cost. So the major chunk of patients coming to India is for the complex surgeries, transplant procedures, or highly technologically demanding procedures. That is one. And another important thing is our indigenous medications. You can say the IUs, because people are much interested, and India has shown its way through the yoga, through the Ayurveda and naturopath. And because of this COVID time now, it has the whole country as well as the outside of the country, the people have a strong belief on the Indian system of medicines. So this is a long-standing interest and passion for the Ministry of Ayush and Ayush related services. So that is also another attraction. So now you can see
That's
one is for the complex surgeries and
right.
second is for the Indian system of medicines.
Right, that's an interesting thing you raised here, Dr. Chaudhary. Before I go off to Urmi here, I'll also seek her opinion on this. You talk about the Indian system or the Indian indigenous medicine of Ayush, Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, and of course like homeopathy. Homeopathy is not Indian, that is the European science. Now here, like those people coming here for the traditional medication, is it for medication purpose essentially, or is it more therapeutic, post-medication or post-heavy surgery they've opted for a sort of a relaxation, a sort of a therapy here in that discipline?
Yeah, basically you can think it is basically a wellness concept mainly. It is basically wellness, preventive, and also as you said, some kind of you can say all type of is
Okay.
mental peace, physical well-being, preventive health. So that is the main cornerstone for the Indian system of medicines. And however, they may be coming for the therapies for the treatment aspect, but I won't have any data. In
Right.
fact, Indian system of medicine is much more famous outside of our country for this wellness oriented. So that is the main attraction for the Indian system of medicine is for the prevention, for the wellness.
Right, right. Urbi, here it's important, right? I mean, in terms of trends or the figures that you've examined, what have you seen in terms of the medication or the or choice of medication for those people who are coming to India? Is it more traditional in the sense of the traditional medicine, or it's now as we are seeing trend of say indigenous medication is also to be noticed?
Well, if you look at, I mean, again, the data on this is not very clear, but
Okay.
if you look at roughly, you'll see that 7% of the of the tourists travel to Kerala, which is famous for its, Ayurvedic wellness centers and resorts and that kind of a setup. So if I extrapolate that data, I'll say that there is a fair interest in the indigenous system of treatment and specifically on the Ayurveda end of it, because that has been kind of worked up into a business or an industry, keeping in mind that you're going to have people who may be interested in non-allopathic options. But I still think that the bulk of your medical tourists, so to speak, are looking at, as Dr. Chaudhary said, at complex surgeries and therefore very much in the mainstream of allopathic. Is there an interest in wellness? Of course, there's a greater interest in wellness today than we saw, say, 10 years ago, because, with the whole thing about, India pushing the International Yoga Day, not that yoga wasn't famous before, but, that whole association with India, yoga going to places where it hadn't been before, you can see that connect happening. So there is that. But, in that same light, because when we are talking medical tourism, we have kind of broadened it out of what is traditionally or in a very conservative way of looking at medical tourism that is going beyond allopathy. I think the time, because we are talking about reviving medical tourism, and the fact of the matter remains that we are still in the stage of the pandemic. I think it's time to look at medical tourism in a slightly even broader way.
Okay.
And then that is looking at two other elements to it. One is medical education. You must not forget that one of the reasons why people are coming to this country for medical treatment is because there is a great degree of faith in our doctors and our health professionals that they can do these complex surgeries, and your sort of chances of, your prognosis is very good. So obviously there is something there in the medical education category where also we can attract outsiders. Now, again, medical tourism, I'm broadening the definition because obviously if you're coming for education, it's for a longer period of time. So it's a longer term tourist. So that's one end we need to speak about. And that not only does it help in terms of increasing the diversity of campuses, it also earning for colleges, again, which can help bolster our broader medical healthcare facility, which requires a lot of sustenance and help. That's one. The other part of it, again, that's a learning from COVID, is our capacity to develop vaccines, not just manufacture. I'm not just talking about Covaxin, there are 8 other therapies that are in the process of being developed. So clearly, that's an vaccine development and drug development is another area. Now, perhaps we can again get people to be part of this. You get people to be part of this drug and vaccine development sort of process. Again, that becomes an area of tourism. As I said, I am stretching the word tourist, I'm stretching the word medical, but I think it's time for us, if you're talking about reviving, we need to look beyond just the traditional ways of looking at medical tourism.
Right, certainly going beyond it. Dr. Chaudhary, in terms of the facilities, now talking strictly about the traditional medication, that is like your allopathy, in terms of the facilities, in terms of the institutional mechanism, where are we placed and how we can do even better? We're number 5 in the world, but of course, we're number 1 among the Asian countries. There is certainly we can grow 4 leaps forward.
Yeah, basically you can say the first to go to top is we need little bit improvement in our hospitality. That is one.
Okay.
2 is in the our some policy. I'm not the right person to say, but that policy also matters. Then third is ease of coming to our part. Suppose we can you can today you got a message that the transplant services has been halted for a year because of COVID, and recently 3 days before there are 21 patients who are brought from Bhutan for some type of transplants in a corporate hospital in Delhi, and for that the hospital from here sent a chartered flight to bring them here, and obviously by the coordination with the 2 governments, where the Indian part and the Bhutan government, they have collaborated, then they have landed off because they are waiting for more than 1 year for a complex surgery for the transplant. So this is how we can make ourselves better as a host to welcome the medical tourism, both in terms of logistics, maybe in the hospital settings, or the logistics in the bottlenecks, you can the rate tourism, and then third, also as far as the cost wise also. So these are the things we can improve, and I am a health professional. I may suggest little bit, I think, but there is a tourism sector and also the administrative backgrounds, they can tell better how we can make it much more robust. But these are the few suggestions from my side.
Right, that's very well put, Dr. Chaudhary, in terms of suggestions. Urmi, in terms of institutional mechanism, what is that you think that we need to do better so as to achieve a little more in this sector as you're talking about reviving the sector?
Well, as Dr. Chaudhary put it, you need to improve the policies, which is improve the ease of travel.
Right.
So we are talking about the resumption of the medical visas, which will happen hopefully as the pandemic sort of wears down, or as we are more sure about the robustness of our ability to handle the situation with the vaccination. So that's one. So that ease of traveling, that's one thing that can be done. The other thing is that we need to remember that you cannot, I mean, so far you're right, we are number 5 in the world among 41 countries, number 1 in Asia. But the truth is that you cannot have excellent tertiary services without a strong base. And I think that's, again, another thing that we need to keep focusing on. One of the biggest policy sort of interventions would be improving healthcare services through the entire chain. Improved healthcare services through the entire chain would actually mean you can open up many more avenues of access for medical tourism. People could actually come not just necessarily for transplants, but something little less complex perhaps. But that need not go to a top specialist hospital, you can go to a middling level hospital. Today, those services don't exist. So as I said, you have to look at the sector. Not, the scope of the sector as it exists is pretty big. But how do you revive it? By broadening it. And by that, you start looking at the other ways, other services you can provide. Because remember, there's a one big section of foreign travelers that are coming to India because the healthcare services here is better. Suppose we can increase that band, and increasing that band has benefits for us because it improves our healthcare system for people who are domestic patients as well. So that's one area of policy intervention that would be very helpful. Not to look at medical tourism just as apart from healthcare services, but as an extension of healthcare services. And I think that helps. You can't have just a branch of a tree being healthy. You need to make the whole tree healthy. So that I would say is the big sort of place where I think an intervention should happen. And we can see that happening.
Right. Urmi, just one last question before I go off to Dr. Chaudhary, and we just heading towards closing the show. As you're acquainting us with the broader trends and, of course, like the figures and the facts on the field, on the ground, in terms of this niche tourism or this category of tourism or inflow of people, is it more confined towards, say, A1 cities or bigger metro cities? Or in next foreseeable future, do you see more hospitals coming up in tier 2 cities so that we can broaden horizon in this avenue of tourism?
Well, you're right. The focus is on tier 1 cities. Maharashtra gets a huge amount of, I think it's 27% of the inflow, of which Mumbai gets the most, then Pune.
Yeah.
So yes, these big cities are the ones that are getting it. But the reason for that is, as Dr. Chaudhary said earlier, you're looking at complex surgeries. Those are happening at high-end tertiary hospitals. So yes, you wanted to move to the to tier 2. You have to broaden the scope of services. And how do you broaden the scope of services? By actually moving into many other areas. And one way of doing it is improving healthcare services in general. I'm not saying people will come to India for a fever, but they might come to India for something that's not as complex as a triple organ transplant. They will come for something that's halfway house between a fever and a triple organ transplant. And for that, you will also think in terms of cost. You move to tier 2 cities, you will also be able to lower costs. Again, think of it as your neighborhood. If you can harness the medical tourism from your neighborhood, that itself is a huge market. You don't have to just depend on people who want to avoid waiting longer, or who have more money but don't have that kind of facilities. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't depend on them, but look at it, that untapped market that you have.
Certainly, untapped market, which is there to go a long way if only we put in a little bit of imagination and effort into it. Dr. Chaudhary, so in terms of how this tourism, to say of, or to say this facility of people coming to India is currently confined largely to bigger cities. I mean, as a medical practitioner, what are the ways you think, or at least, just like it's a freewheeling discussion, you think that it can perhaps reach to tier 2 cities or say smaller towns?
Yeah, as rightly said, we need to broaden the scope. That means it should be not only the high end, also it can be something in between. So that is one. Two is the ease of availability. Thus, people should have a trust on the tier 2 cities, small hospitals for having a good facilities. And for that, we need first is the ease of traveling. Then, and second is the IEC activities. They should know where and they can go. Maybe the tier 1 or tier 2, they can get at an affordable price. They can get the same treatment in a tier 1 metro city or tier 2 city.
Right.
But tier 2 city will be less cost effective. But this system should be mechanism. We should make that there should be information to them. They can reach to that area. Then the next important is that if we are committing, one is medical tourism till now is considered to be one part is only for the medical treatment. But as rightly said by Goswami ji, we can now think of adding medical education. We can have universities, institutes collaborations. We can have research basis.
Okay.
Then other medical allied. You can have the medical technologies, medical devices, and the science centers. If they are also a source of having mutual exchange, so that will also further increase the footfalls and travels. So basically, we can have more medical-based research developments. We can think in the line of tier 2 cities, because that will be also good for the public and for the country also. And indirectly, we can get help for the medical tourism. That can be one part. Second, our hospital facilities tier 2 cities, even having the good facilities, they are not aware of. Everyone aware of the facilities available in the metro cities. So we should make such a mechanism that this information activities they should be passed to them. Then third, when these people are coming from a other countries or other parts, they have a ease of traveling to a smaller city too, and the hospitality also broaden. So it is just need a basket which we have to make a wholesome improvement so that we can get a footfall even in the tier 2 cities. What I can say.
Right, that's really important. Of course, like these were suggestions put forth by Dr. Ashok Chaudhary, who is medical practitioner himself. So clearly, there is a lot we can tap in this sector and lot we can achieve in foreseeable future. There is a requirement of the institutional support, as both the panelists quite agree to it, and also how we can take these services to tier 2 cities. There, the potential can be further tapped. Many thanks, Urmi Goswami, for joining us and giving us a broader picture of what is happening on the ground, especially in terms of the facts and figures. Many thanks, Dr. Ashok Chaudhary, for making us aware with, of course, like the achievements and, of course, challenges in this facet. Well, that's it in this edition of Discussion Today. Many thanks to our viewers for watching RSTV and our show. Thank you and goodbye.